All right, welcome everybody to according to Andrew number 2, Ignatius's 14 rules for spiritual discernment, which are actually useful, unlike Jordan Peterson's 12 rules for life. And I found them very useful, even if you're like not religious and stuff like that. They they can be applied in a lot of ways. And I kind of wanted to review them, and I thought it would be useful for people who hadn't heard about it to go through them with everybody. Now, these rules they're not that long, but they're very dense. So I'm going from The Discernment of Spirits by Timothy Gallagher, who took these and then expanded on it. It's not too long of a book. It's only like 200 odd pages. Um, and I first got this through a um, men's group, religious group, where we would read it and meet together and discuss it chapter by chapter, which I found very useful. So maybe something that people want to give a shot. Um, it was useful to have it was run by a Monsignor when I did it. And so he had read the text before. He knew this stuff really well. And so his insights on it were very useful, especially some of those really key cornerstone areas where it's you don't want to go too far in an interpretation of something. And what I mean by that is um, it, I think Plato described it as like there's like a balance between like two extremes kind of thing, and you have to find that fine line to walk in the middle. Uh, so it'd be like the difference between like sloth and like overworking yourself, right? If you overwork yourself, you don't have time for anything else. If you're slothful, you're not living up to your potential, kind of thing. And you have to kind of find a balance there. Uh, Things kind of like that. But anyway, one other thing is I believe he mentions the enemy instead of saying like the devil or something like that. That's just referring to the devil, in case anyone's curious. So let's go through these rules and then we will discuss them. I might break this out and do like one of these on each rule so I can go more in depth on them. But this will at least give us an overview on what the 14 rules are. So, the first rule. First rule is persons who are going from mortal sin to mortal sin, the enemy is ordinarily accustomed to propose apparent pleasures to them, leading them to imagine sensual delights and pleasures in order to hold them more and make them grow in their vices and sins. In these persons, the good spirit uses a contrary method, stinging and biting their conscience through their rational power of moral judgment. So that's your conscience, right? Biting at you when you know you're doing something bad, and you're like, I need to stop doing this and stuff like that. But the enemy is always going to be there trying to convince you that what you're doing is good, that there is no such thing as like mortal sin and stuff like that, and just keep doing what keep sinning your vices. That classic Augustine quote of a man has as many masters as he has vices applies aptly here. The second rule. Second rule, in persons who are intensely pure, going on intensely purifying their sins and rising from good to better in the service of God our Lord, the method is contrary to the first rule. For then it is proper for the evil spirit to bite, sadden, and place obstacles, disquieting with false reasons, so that persons may not go forward. And it is proper to the good spirit to give courage and strength, consolation, tears, inspirations, and quite easing and taking away all obstacles so that the person may go forward in doing good. Um, I think a good way to think about this one is like these false obstacles that we have for ourselves. So, a good example is whenever you have to like kind of like go apologize for something, or you play out like conversations in your head of like how things are going to play out, and you're always like really worried that like the person's not going to take your apology, or just like all these like extreme circumstances. And like 99% of the time you go up and you're like, look man, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that, this is how things should have, like, I should have had your back in this thing. And most of the time they're just like, okay, or like they don't even they had already gotten over it, and it was something that was like really controlling your life, and um, so you just have to kind of remember that um, that a lot of these obstacles are more mental barriers than actual physical barriers. The third rule. The third rule is of spiritual consolation. I call it. Oh, thank you very much for the follow. Uh, Selnique Bear. Hopefully, I pronounced that right. Um, all right, let's start. The third rule is of spiritual consolation. I call it consolation when some inner movement is caused in the soul, through which the soul comes to be inflamed with the love of its Creator and Lord, and consequently when it can love no created thing on the face of the earth in itself, but only in the Creator of them all. Likewise, when it sheds tears that move in the love of its Lord, uh, whether out of sorrow for one's sins or for the passions of Christ our Lord, or because of other things directly ordered to his service and praise, shall I call consolation ever increase of hope, faith, and charity, and all inner joy that calls and attracts to heavenly things, and to be the salvations of one's soul, quieting it and giving it peace in its Creator Lord. So here, I mean, this can kind of be attributed to the current situation that we're facing, where uh, we got all this craziness happening, and everything's being disrupted. They're trying to demoralize everyone and stuff like that, and that's they're trying to remove your consolation that like there's always something bigger and better that you always are working towards eternal salvation with the Lord and stuff like that, and they're trying to throw you off of that, keep you focused on the immediate and not the long term, and and it really disrupts your like peace of heart and stuff like that, which I believe we'll get into in the next couple rules. But like that it's that like quiet peace that you can attain when following the Lord's advice. Yeah. The fourth rule. The fourth rule is of spiritual desolation. I call desolation all the contrary of the third rule, such as darkness of souls, disturbance in it, movement to low and earthly things, disquiet from various agitations and temptations, moving to lack of confidence, without hope, without love, finding oneself totally slothful, tepid, and as if separated from one's Creator and Lord. For just as consolation is contrary to desolation, in the same way thoughts that come from consolation are contrary to thoughts that come from desolation. And this is kind of why I wanted to review this, because this fourth rule is kind of where I've been stuck recently, where I uh, I just feel like I've kind of been spinning my wheels. I haven't been kind of getting anywhere, and then that's let spiritual desolation kind of creep in and you know let things like despair and stuff like that creep into my life, which I really shouldn't, um, because I'm aware of these rules, but that's why I wanted to kind of go back over them to kind of remind myself of all of these tasks or all of these things that and abilities that have been given me. Hello to you, Dan from Minnesota. Uh, that's my dad's name. I highly doubt you're my dad, but if you are, hello. Um, Anyway, so the next part, the fifth rule. The fifth, in times of desolation, never make a change, but be firm and constant in the proposals and determination in which one was the day preceding such desolation, or in the determination in which one was in the preceding consolation. Because, as in all consolation, the good spirit guides and consoles us more, so in desolation, the bad spirit with those counsels, we cannot find the way to right decision. All right, good to know. Thank you, Dan from Minnesota. uh, um, so this fifth rule is very important and something I like to keep in mind because uh, when things are going bad and stuff like we can be kind of doing stuff and thinking everything's going good and we're praying and everything's going good, and then all of a sudden like we kind of something goes wrong, there's some kind of misstep, and there might be a change that we need to make in our lives that maybe got us to there, and that's something that'll be covered in the later rules. But uh, this step is really important because it's much easier. Like when something happens to you and you're kind of in a state of desolation, it's much easier to make a bad decision than it is to make a good decision. So if things were working and you're following a plan, you need to just stick to the plan. It's the classic. Like in the military, like if they're busting through a door and they're like, this is the plan, this is what we're gonna go for. Like a bad plan followed is better than 5 plans half followed. Um, to a point. Obviously, if your plan is to do wicked things, then if you don't follow that plan, But you know what I'm assuming most people understand what I say when I say that. So yeah, that's something that is very useful and helpful to keep in mind. All right, next rule. Sixth rule. Sixth rule. Although in Okay, good. I was worried I was not recording. Okay. Uh, Although in desolation we should not change our first proposals, it is very advantageous to change ourselves intensely against the desolation itself, as by insisting more upon prayer, meditation, upon much examination, and upon extending ourselves in some suitable way to do penance. Um, So this is like, making sure that you reflect and think about how you got here and what caused the desolation to make sure that you don't trigger that thing again. So if uh, you know going on Tinder or something like that leads you to then start surfing the internet for porn or something like that, and then leads you down that path, maybe you should delete Tinder, kind of thing. So like that's a change that you should make in your life. If you eat fatty foods, and then it makes you see or you drink too much the night before, and you're supposed to get up early and go for a run, and you don't do that because of that. Maybe you should look at not doing those things to keep on the path to make sure that you keep doing the important things like doing runs and stuff like that. So those are the kind of changes that they're talking about. The seventh rule. The seventh, let one who is in desolation consider how the Lord has left him in a trial in his natural powers, so that he may resist the various agitations and temptations of the enemy, since he can resist with the divine help, which always remains with him, though he does not clearly feel it. For the Lord has taken away from him his great fervor, abundant love, and intense grace, leaving him, however, in sufficient grace for eternal salvation. So that's something we always need to remember is even though we might feel depressed, we might feel down, it might feel like we got nothing, that God has left us. Um, you know, this realm is a test to make sure that we are worthy for the next realm, for the eternal life with God and Jesus and all of our loved ones. And so we need to make sure that we are adequately prepared for the trials of the next level, as it were. And so, when you are feeling this desolation and stuff like that, it's a very helpful reminder to be like, okay, I feel this way, but this is to recognize it's a test. It makes it much easier to get over some of these burdens and not give into and not fail that test, which I wish I had remembered recently, and I would probably fail less. But now that I do remember it, hopefully next time it won't be as bad. Um, and it's definitely one that I need to. I'm glad I'm going over these again. Um, the eighth rule. The eighth, let one who is in desolation work to be in patience, which is contrary to the vexations which come to him, and let him think that he will soon be consoled, diligently using the means against such desolation, as said in the sixth rule. So this is, just keeping on the path, making sure that you continue to do as you're doing, even if you do feel in desolation, knowing that this feeling and these problems will come to pass at some point. And it might take a little bit. It might be a very prolonged period of time. It might be a couple hours, might be days, might be years. Who knows? But know that you will get through it. Um, the ninth rule. Uh, the ninth, there are three principal causes for which we find ourselves desolate. The first is because we are tepid, slothful, or negligent in our spiritual exercises. And so, through our faults spiritually, consolation withdraws from us. The, the second is to try us and see how much we are and how much we extend ourselves in the service and praise, which so much payment of consolation and increased graces. The third is to give us true recognition and understanding so that we may interiorly feel that it is not ours to attain or maintain increased devotion, intense love, uh, tears, or any spiritual consolation, but that all the gifts and graces of God our Lord, and so that we may not build a nest in something belonging to another, raising our mind in some pride or vainglory, attributing to ourselves the devotion of the other parts of the spiritual consolation. So this is a good example of that kind of back and forth, uh, that fine line that you have to walk, because as you're trying to be um, uh, working in and be loving in God and stuff like that, it's really easy to fall into this idea uh, of self glorification, that you like you're such a good person kind of thing. That typical Christianity, or not Christianity, churchianity type thing that you get from certain people, of like, the only fault I have is that I'm too good kind of thing, and you don't want to do that. It's really bad. Um, but also, um, there's the other aspects of it where, um, we aren't living up to what we need to. We're being slothful. We're not uh, being as productive as uh, and working as hard as we need to. Falling into a rut. Right. That's one issue that I've kind of had is, and it kind of a little bit goes contrary to the sixth rule, where it tells you not to change stuff, but at the same time, sometimes you can kind of be on autopilot with things like prayer and stuff like that, and you need to keep that in mind. Where like maybe um, like saying the Our Father prayer every night is like a good thing, right? But if you're just doing it on autopilot, like how much is that giving you in terms of actual prayer? Like, maybe it should be like, okay, my thing that I need to not change is prayer, but like how I pray, I need to, change it up. Specifically, ask God for specific things to give me strength and consolation in specific things, and make it so that it's not just an autopilot kind of thing, so that we aren't truly partaking in the graces that God has bestowed upon us. Um, and then, did I answer the second one? And then the second one is kind of going back to it, like God testing us, right? Making sure that we are up to the challenge of and up to the needs required of us in the next life. The 10th rule. The 10th, let the one who is in consolation think how he will conduct himself in desolation, which will come after taking new strength for that time. So this is, once you're out of that desolation kind of thing, you need to make sure, like, it's going to come again. So now when you're in consolation, you need to take steps to make sure to mitigate that desolation that is going to be coming, right? A classic example that was used was, you're at a bus, you're standing up, you're holding onto the railing, and there's going to be a turn coming up, and you need to look forward and brace for that, so that you're not thrown off your feet when that turn inevitably comes. And so, not being so in the moment that you can't think ahead and prepare for these inevitable pitfalls and setbacks that are going to happen as you move through these problems. The 11th rule. The 11th, let one who is consoled seek to humble himself and lower himself as much as he can, thinking of how little he is capable in times of desolation without such grace or consolation. On the contrary, let one who is in desolation think that he can do much with God's sufficient grace to resist all his enemies, taking strength in his Creator and Lord. So this one really exemplifies the idea that we, as we're God's children, right? And we need to rely on God to uh, to lead us and to be our Father, and not think that we're the goal isn't to get to a strength level that we don't need God anymore. And that's kind of like um, a trap that I fall into quite a bit, where it, the idea is you want to get to a point where you know, you can withstand all of the trials and tribulations that have come up without the need for God. And it's a mistake. The whole point is that we always need God for all of our aspects of life, and this is why we have these faults and these things that we kind of keep falling into, to help us remind ourselves that we need to continue. It's, you know, when you, I guess if weightlifting might be a good example. You know, um, when you're able to lift 225 pounds or whatever, like bench press that, let's just say, and you don't just say, okay, well, I've reached this and now I never need to lift it ever again, right? Because I've reached this thing. It's like, well, if you don't continue with what you're doing, you're gonna deteriorate. You're not gonna be there. And so, um, you you need to continue to seek for and ask for God's help in all these things. But understand that God's always there. He's always got your back. He's the man, basically. When it comes to times where you're troubled and stuff like that, and know that He can get you out of those uh, dark places, no matter how dark you've gone. And it like and people know how dark places get. And I don't know how that road is back, but if you're in one of those really dark places, there is a road back for you. But it might be tough. But like we said, a lot of those barriers are more mental than anything else. But it won't be easy. Um, the 12th rule, uh, the 12th, the enemy attacks like a woman in being weak when faced with strength and strong when faced with weakness. For as it is proper to a woman when she is fighting with some man to lose heart and to flee when the man confronts her firmly, and on the contrary, if a man begins to flee, lose heart, the anger and vengeance and ferocity of the woman grows greatly and know no bounds in the same way. It is proper for the enemy to weaken and lose heart, fleeing and ceasing his temptations when the person who is exercising himself in spiritual things confronts the temptations of the enemy firmly. Doing so is diametrically opposed to them. And on the contrary, if the person who is exercising himself begins to be afraid and lose heart in suffering the temptations, there is no beast so fierce as the face of the earth and the enemy of the human nature in following his damnable intentions with such growing malice. So this one kind of, it's like the predator prey type thing. Like if you act like prey, you will be, you know, attacked like prey. It's like um, think of, there's like videos out there of people like getting attacked, or not attacked by mountain lions, but like people coming up on mountain lions. And the way that they don't get killed is they stand, like it's scary, but you stand firm, and you don't let, like, you don't give them your backside, you don't run away and stuff like that, and then they won't attack you generally. Um, because it's, and in this case they won't, right? And so um, you need to be able to stand firm and stand against that. And then if you try to run away, you know, it just reveals your backside, and it's really easy for them to kind of attack you and relentlessly pursue you. And so that's why it's so important to stand firm on the principles that you truly believe in. I think that covers that rule. The 13th rule. The 13th, likewise, he conducts himself as a false lover in wishing to remain secret and not be revealed. For a dissolute man who, speaking with evil intentions, makes dishonorable advances to a daughter of a good father or wife of a good husband, wishes his words and persuasions to be secret, and the contrary displeases him very much. When the daughter reveals to her father or the wife of her husband with false words and depraved intentions, because he easily perceives that he will not be able to succeed with the undertaking begun. In the same way, when the enemy of human nature brings his wiles and persuasions to the just soul, he wishes and desires that he be received and kept in secret. But when one reveals them to one's good confessor or to another spiritual person, one knows his deceits and malicious designs, it weighs on him very much because he perceives that he will not be able to succeed with the malicious undertakings he has begun, since his manifest deceits have been revealed. So this describes a couple things. So it kind of describes the gamma behavior of the devil, which the devil definitely gamma. Um, and it also describes how you have to be honest with yourself and on what like your failings and stuff like this. And this is where I think confession is very helpful, even though Catholic Church has a lot of problems. Um, this is where I think something that could be very helpful for people is, and it doesn't have to be like a priestly confession, but like it's nice to know that option's always there, right? To just be like, this is what I've done wrong, this is what I need to get better at, and really try to get myself fixed in that way. Um, and but like maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's uh, a good friend of yours, something like that. But having someone, because you can do it through prayer and stuff like that, but at least personally, I found it really easy to kind of pretend like I've confessed for something when I kind of haven't. Like it's much it it's kind of obvious that you haven't really confessed to something when it's painful for you to tell someone else what you've done, if you know what I'm saying. So it's like once you have, it's you kind of can feel that like that weight drop off of you, and it's very relieving. And so that is one reason I recommend confession, or at least uh, a proxy for it with, you know, a good friend. And if someone needs to do that for themselves with you, be a shoulder for them if you can. Um, the 14th rule, last one. 14th, likewise, he conducts himself as a leader intent upon conquering and robbing what he desires. For just as a captain and a leader of an army in the field, pitching his camp and exploring the fortifications and defenses of a stronghold, attacks its weakest point, in the same way the enemy of the human nature, revolving about, looks in turn at our theological, cardinal, and moral virtues, and where he finds us weakest and most in need for our eternal salvation, there he attacks and attempts to take us. And so just being cognizant of what your abilities are, what your shortcomings are, where you potentially are weak, and then doing and taking the steps necessary to prevent that. So an easy example for this is like I'm overweight, and um, like sweets are a big problem for me, and so easy way to shore this problem up is to just, when I'm at the store, don't buy sweets and don't bring them into my house, and then it's not a problem, right? And is that, in a certain sense, it is shoring up my weakness, and in a certain sense, it's not. But like, you got to understand what your limits are, and it's if you're, it's the easiest and most straightforward way to attack the problem, right? Ideally, you would be able to like kind of resist it and stuff like that, but you know, chocolate chip cookies are delicious, and if there's some around, I'm gonna want to eat them. That's just how it is. So if they're not around, I don't have to worry about eating them. Um, so that, and then you have to understand, like, as you build up your defenses in one area and you shore that up, you need to make sure that your defenses in other areas don't degrade and weaken, so that the enemy switches where his attack point is and attacks through there. And what's eventually going to happen is, if you even if you don't degrade that, like let's say your weak point is sweets, like I just said, and you built up really good defenses against that, but you didn't build up your defenses in other areas. Um, no matter how strong your fortifications are, the enemy is going to try to find a way in, and he'll just attack you at your weakest point. So now you have a new weakest point, and you're going to have to reevaluate and think about how to shore up that thing. And it's kind of like one of those the ride never ends kind of thing, but it also makes it interesting because it's like there's always some kind of challenge, there's always some kind of thing to be working on, and it gives it means that you'll always have a purpose. You'll always have a thing to improve on, and as they say, man needs a mission. So um, that covers the 14 points. Very cursory gloss over type aspect of it. But I thought it went pretty well. Um, I will when I upload this to YouTube, I will um, share this book. I'll find the Amazon link for it and I'll share it so that people can get it. If people want me to go into those rules in a little bit more depth, like on an individual episode basis or something like that, I can do so. But I found those rules very, very useful, and I thought it was very useful for me to go over them again. And yeah, it's something that you can apply in. It's definitely useful in your religious aspect of your life, but it can obviously be applied in many aspects of your life, and that's the great part about like the fractal nature of things like the Bible and stuff like that, is it's true in all aspects, and therefore it can be applied in all aspects of life and stuff like that. Thank you for the people that tuned in. If there's anyone in the chat, do they have any questions for me? Alrighty. If there aren't any questions, um, I will be uploading this to YouTube. Those on YouTube, I stream these on DLive. I don't really have a set time, so as I get that, maybe I will add the set time. But if you are on YouTube, share, like, subscribe. It's appreciated. And being that how I'm doing this is mainly just sound, maybe I'll try to figure out a way to upload these to some form of podcast type site. But for the time being, this is where they're at. So if someone has a way to get them and strip the audio and put them someplace, feel free to. But anyway, I have been Andrew, and I hope you all have a good day.